Welcome to the Echo Essentials podcast.
I'm Dave Dale.
And I'm Scott Clark. Today we have Shawn Flindall joining us in the studio, the Director of Marketing Communications for the North Bay Snowmobile Club. We're going to touch on a number of different topics, from the economic impact to the quality of the trails today, and you're hearing this about a week later, and of course why snowmobiling is so darn important for our region. That's all coming up. But before we get there, we want to thank our show sponsor, Source for Sports.
Sports aren't just what we do, they're who we are. Source for Sports North Bay is your advocate, your local support system, and your biggest fan. 1321 Fisher Street has grown from a place where knowledgeable experts can help you find exactly the gear you need, to the hotbed of team uniforms, apparel and fanwear, to a community stronghold for all the things that truly matter to you and your family's sports journey. We love helping you find your first pair of skates, as much as we relish supporting local leagues, teams, and athletes. Wherever your sports journey takes you, make sure you visit Source for Sports North Bay at 1321 Fisher Street so we can help you along your way.
Dave, one of the things I want to mention, I want to thank all the viewers and listeners to the Echo Essentials podcast. And of course, we have a number of awesome podcasts on the Echo Essentials Network, or the Echo Community Network. You can simply go to northbayecho.ca to find out more information on that. And one of the things you could do to support us is if you're watching on YouTube right now, just hit that like button, subscribe to us. It means a lot. It helps us move forward, and it confirms to the people like Source for Sports that sponsors us that our audience is growing and you're supporting us. And it's really important that you go in there and support them as well. So you, when we were lining up this show, Dave, you said, "Hey, this is pretty cool because it's like our 50th show," and you said, what if we got like our first guest? Which I actually didn't. I didn't recall that Shawn Flindall from the Snowmobile Club was like our first guest on the podcast.
Yeah, it was funny because we interviewed him before Christmas when we didn't know about how bad the snowmobile season was going to be. And then our first podcast didn't come out till like 3 or 4 weeks later. And then it was dismal. And it was the record-setting low days numbers for that season. And we didn't realize it until then. Yeah. So it was kind of awkward, but that's the way the podcast business goes.
Yeah, because we're usually a week or so, or depending on when this is being recorded, right?
We were just trying to, and he just happened to be in December, it looked like it was going to be a good snow year. So everybody's happy.
Yeah, well, we heard the same thing about this year, right? I had heard that we were going to ton of snow, and it did. We got a good dumping early, but then there was that long period of rain. It was like a week of rain, and just wipes out the snow. Shawn's still in this podcast. Shawn's still quite optimistic. I'm always taken back at the economic impact of the snowmobile. Does it surprise you when he's saying like it's billions of dollars in Ontario?
Yeah, he says 3 to 5 billion provincially, and the bulk of it is in Northern Ontario, where we have usually the most snow days,
most consistent snow, and things that are happening there, and I'm sure that takes in because we talk a little bit, I think, near the end of the cast of snowmobiles and some people getting out. You had asked the question, is like, are some people getting out of the snowmobile business? And Yamaha, I think, is getting out. Yeah. So really, actually, the one thing I didn't say was I was thinking, this is really a buyer's market right now. If you're looking for a sled, you can, and the new sleds, have you seen them? They're gorgeous. They're like beautiful pieces of machinery. Now's a buyer's time. You can probably get some pretty good deals.
Crotch rockets.
Yeah, they are. I have a side-by-side, only because I used to have snowmobiles, and honestly, they scare me a bit. They're just, and I didn't have super powerful one. They are rockets. They really are. Now, speaking of the lake, and just this past weekend, I took out the ice hut, so I'm looking forward to that. You're going to have to come out. And
we should record a podcast with
that. So Ben and I talked about that. We want to do ice hut podcasting, right? So we'll go out and
I'm in.
And have discussion.
Go kill some minnows.
Lunch, kill some minnows, and the fishing's been good. But I noticed and this is in the Echo Essentials newsletter you just put together, you're the editor, that there was a segment in there about people talking about taking vehicles on the lake and the environmental piece of that.
Yeah.
What spawned that?
Well, photographer and musician Dave Zeke Johnson, I know him, and I saw one of his posts where he just sort of shared a pet peeve. He had a picture of a parking lot of trucks on just
Sunset?
off Sunset Park.
Yeah.
And he said, that's got to be environmentally hazardous because every vehicle leaks fuel, the lubricants, oil, and we're just putting them straight on there, and in the spring it's going to go in. And he thought there's got to be a better way. There's got to be some way to mitigate this. We're doing something to the lake for sure. And the posts on it underneath, Facebook, everybody has an opinion.
Yeah, there's quite a few posts that you actually, when you click on it, click on your
yeah,
line.
we have the articles now.
The articles are in there. It's really good.
Yeah, and there's people that say, hey, we're polluting the lake anyways. All the stuff, the runoff from the roads is going in there. If you park in a parking lot beside the lake, it's going to go in there. And others are, no, this is a problem. This is one thing we can do to lessen the impact. Because in my opinion, there is a lot of runoff that goes in the lake, but doesn't mean we can just blatantly put it all on the lake and forget about it. And if there's a buffer, like most shoreline properties should have, of vegetation, 10 feet or so, I think there's a buffer required. That mitigates and attenuates whatever's flowing in. Slows it down, stops it, gives it a chance to decompose a bit.
I hear what you're saying, but yes, but it's like the greater issue is the amount of sewage that drains directly in it. Like just off the front of my house, the back of my house. I'd have to look out the back of my house to see there is just off, like, I think it's Campbell, or I can't remember all the streets, and I live there. But you can see, like, as soon as anything starts to thaw, you'll see the rivers start to flow. Like, and even Chippewa Creek, like like people wash their cars, driving around, like it flows right directly into the lake. And that's just the one I see. So I can imagine they're all along that have that. That would be the one that's like, hey, we need to address this, as opposed to, I don't know how many. Now, if you have an old jalopy, yeah, maybe it's going to drip some oil, but most of them don't drip oil anymore. It's not the same. It's not how it used to be. So I get what he's saying, but it's good you got people talking, because in the survey, most said no. I think it was like 70% in the survey said no, people, they shouldn't be driving out there because of the environmental side of things.
They said no to can you call up that poll on the newsletter to see what the real question was? Like just to make sure we got it. So are you saying that people were in agreement something should be done or should not be done?
The way I read it was in the poll that people shouldn't be on the lake with those cars.
Should motorized vehicles be allowed to park on Lake Nipissing ice?
Okay. So yeah. So no, people are responding they should not be.
Yeah. Which I actually, that surprises me, because I don't think it's that many. Like I know in that area, but I don't think it's that many compared to the runoff that goes down these tributaries that go right into Nipissing. Holy, that needs to be looked at.
Well, yeah, I hear you, but we're looking at, and I'm a guy that likes to get as close as possible to the hut with my car if I can, right? It's a long walk, right? I don't have a sled or side-by-side or something like that. So, but I have to be, cognizant of the potential of what I'm doing to the lake as far as, pollution goes. You'd want to make sure that you don't have an old jalopy out there and leaking. They still do leak. I don't know. It should be looked at. Now, there's a couple ideas that came to my mind in looking at it. One, people can put something underneath their cars. I usually put cardboard under mine at home if it's leaking. Just right.
That's very kind of you. Because you never do it in our parking lot here. I've never seen you put cardboard underneath.
I have a newer car now.
Oh, okay. It doesn't leak as much.
Also, you could actually have the MNR or whoever, they're going out and check. They're very active this year and checking for people, make sure they have licenses and the slot size. Why not have something that throw underneath the car, and if you come up with oil dripping on it, that one gets a fine.
And that's how I responded on your survey.
Oh, okay.
Was about I'm okay with it. It's like if you're leaking oil, you're gonna have to pay the price.
Yeah.
It's just like I think because I would arm wrestle you a little bit. I'd be curious to see like the marina, like with gas and the pumping of the gas and the big boats that are down there. I bet you. Like, I would never swim. You know how they do the polar plunge? Ew. I would never go in the marina. Ew. Where they do it there? It's gross.
Well, along those lines, I believe that there's a requirement for upgraded motors. Some are grandfathered in, but to reduce the amount of pollution. So they went to 4-stroke. So that reduces it, right? Mm-hmm. And I'm not sure if Lake Nipissing is one of those where you're required to have a 4-stroke. But it's different than having the oil mix.
That's it. I actually don't know that, and I'm a boater, and I don't know about that. So
it might have been one of those marketing ads I saw for Yamaha 4-strokes, right?
Yeah. Well,
Stop polluting your lake. Spend $10,000.
Yeah. Well, they're much better engines. But they don't have the power of a 2-stroke. Like those are powerful engines, right?
I've never had a big enough boat to worry about that.
Well, you know what we should do? So we should go grab a coffee and talk more about this so we can get into the interview with Shawn Flindall. And if we are, we're definitely going over to our sponsor, Twigg's Coffee Roasters. Twigg's Coffee Roasters is my favorite spot to go for freshly roasted coffee. They do the beans right there. What color are the beans, Dave, before they're roasted?
Black.
Green. You didn't? I thought you would have known that. Yeah. All coffee beans.
I buy the cheapest coffee, and it's a treat to go to Twiggs.
Yeah. So they're green before they're roasted. I'll give you another hot tip that I've learned with Jen, Laura, and Megan over the years. What level of coffee has the most caffeine in it?
Non-caffeinated.
Boy, you're like conspiracy filled. No, most people think the most caffeine's in a dark roast. It's actually in a medium roast. They dark roast it. It takes some of the caffeine out of it.
I guess I'm messing with you.
Yeah, I know. You're not playing along at all here. 5 locations to serve you: North Bay, Sturgeon Falls, and Sudbury. Make sure you check out Twiggs. They offer the espresso bar, their gourmet deli, irresistible fresh baked goods, including gluten-free options as well. Please stop by and enjoy a Twiggs today. Twiggs Coffee Roasters.
This is our happy number 50th.
Number 50.
And we brought Shawn Flindall in from the North Bay Snowmobile Club because he was our first podcast.
He was our first. So it was 50 podcasts ago.
Whew, I'm glad you didn't say it was 50 years ago.
Though we've probably known each other that long, Shawn.
Probably.
You never age, though. You look the same. You must live a good life, Shawn.
Oh, yeah, maybe I do. Maybe
you probably aged a little bit last year with the snowmobile season.
I did age last year. You're not wrong. We had 9 days of open trails around here, and
what's traditionally how many days? Traditionally,
I would say like a 9 or 10 week season is pretty typical. If we get 12, that's awesome. If we get 7 or 8, that's a little on the light side. So to get 9 days last year was a real kick in the pants.
So we got hit with some snow early this year, which is great. Yeah. Then we had a bit of a melt.
Yeah.
Now we've gone through a bit of a deep freeze. The good thing about that is the ice fishing there's a ton of this weekend. It was like the 401. Like there's so many people out there getting their huts out and everything like that. But that doesn't always mean that the snowmobile trails are having as good a luck.
No, it's a pretty tricky, pretty complicated startup. Actually, what we need is cold first. If we get a lot of snow, it really insulates all the ponds and the swamps and to the point where they just won't freeze because there's too much snow on top of them. So the melt that we got through Christmas was actually a bit of a bonus for us because it sort of washed everything away, and then we got a week or 10 days of actual cold temperatures, like 15, 20 below, even in the daytime. So that's been great. And as you say, Lake Nipissing and Trout Lake have got about an inch of a foot of really good black ice on it now. That's not to say that...
Even trout?
Yeah, trout as well. Yeah, that's not to say that lakes are completely safe. We all know that, if you've got a foot of ice here, that doesn't mean that there's a foot of ice 20 feet over there because of currents and whatnot. And the other challenge on the lakes right now is pressure cracks. Even Trout Lake has a massive pressure crack right across the middle of the big water, which is pretty unusual for Trout Lake, but Nipissing has a bunch as well. And it's because of that thaw and then extreme immediate cold that's causing all that. So yes, there's some good ice in most places, but that's not to say that everything is safe. But yeah, it's a real complicated startup in that we need the cold weather, and then we need to pack trails, and we need about 1.5 feet of snow in order to even pack them before we get actual grooming equipment out there. And we haven't reached that yet. There's still rocks and stumps and you name it exposed, and so to run some sleds over that is not very much fun, hitting rocks all the time. So you can imagine with the 7-ton groomer rolling over that, it's not very much fun on the equipment either. So we're getting there, but in all honesty, we need a foot of snow to really get to a point where we can start moving. And it's a challenge in all of Ontario, as it was last season. Even that stretch from Cochrane to Cap and Hearst is not yet fully open.
Oh, really?
Yeah,
Even
like
north.
Cochrane through to Cap is open, but they haven't been able to connect around Cap and over to Hearst, and it's all because of lack of snow and that thaw through the Christmas. And if we look at the long range forecast, it's just dribs and drabs, right? Like we're getting 1 to 3, 1 to 3. We don't see a whole lot of snow coming, so we're getting there.
How did the Muskokas fare? Remember they got that massive
dumping. They got
dumping.
so much snow that they couldn't even groom it, actually.
That seems absurd.
The opposite problem.
Opposite problem, yeah.
That seems absurd. They couldn't even groom it.
Couldn't even groom it. Couldn't get through it with the groomers. It was too much snow. They got 4 feet in 48 hours.
Wow.
4 feet of snow.
That's crazy.
It's crazy.
Yeah.
Like it's a lot of snow, but to imagine that it all came in 48 hours is just unreal.
What
Sault Ste. Marie got absolutely hammered. Is there other parts in Northern Ontario that are faring better?
Not so much yet. The only thing really open trail-wise in Northern Ontario is from Iroquois Falls to Cap. Sault Ste. Marie has gotten a lot of snow, so I'd imagine that in the next few days we'll see some open conditions there. There are some open conditions through Simcoe, like south of where that 4 feet was, because they got the 4 feet of snow, and then through Christmas it rained for days and days, so they lost most of it. But there are some good trail conditions in Simcoe. I've been talking to some buddies down there, and unfortunately the traffic is just beating it all up. But they're grooming every night, and they've got some decent conditions there. But through our area, the beauty in that Simcoe and Southern Ontario area is that they're largely running on farmers' fields. And the challenge in our area is that we're hopping from one swamp and loon pot to another swamp and loon pot, right? And this stuff doesn't freeze. So we have real challenging circumstances specifically in our region just because of all the water bodies that we've got to get across.
Any landowner issues this year is holding things up?
Oh boy, there's always landowner issues, and this is a long story, Dave, but so the OFSC initiated a new program this year whereby we've always been kind of wishy-washy with landowner permits, and we've got some permits that were signed 20 years ago and some permits that are kind of signed but not really. And so they undertook a big project this year to just bring everything up to date with all these landowner permits. And so it's been challenging because tracking some of these landowners down is really tricky. Some of the properties have sold. We can't, it's difficult to find the new owners and connect with the new owners. Sometimes the owners are in favor, sometimes they're not. Sometimes they're in Southern Ontario and they really don't understand the economic impact and the importance of snowmobiling to Northern Ontario. So that's been a challenge. And in fact, if you can imagine, dealing with Bell Canada and the pipelines and the hydro that has been a bigger nightmare for us.
Really?
Just because of the layers you have to go through to get an actual, it's got to go to our legal department and then the next legal department and then the next legal department. And it's often easier to track down a Scott Clark or a Dave Dale for signatures on land permits than it is to get approval from Hydro or Bell or the pipelines.
And I would think when you're dealing with lawyers, they are risk adverse.
Absolutely.
They don't like...
Absolutely. Do you want people on the property on snow machines? And no, of course. So it's a real trick. You would think that those, especially Hydro, and the pipeline crown corporations would support provincial organizations that are tourist and economic drivers. But that's not the case. So we're struggling at this point. We're struggling more so with the Bell Canadas and the Hydros of the world than we are with property owners. So, the map that riders go to see what trails are open is a real hopscotch right now, because there's so many trails that aren't even listed as trails, because we can't list them as trails until Bell Canada signs off, or until these large organizations sign off. It's not just the Scott Clarks of the world who own 200 acres outside of Redbridge. It's and there are hundreds of those. God love those landowners for their generosity in allowing us to use their land for purposes of the trails. It's not just that, though. It's the bigger organizations.
Do you guys do that on the local level, or does that go up to the... You guys will do... You have to, on the local level, do that work?
Yeah, guys, I'll tell you, this whole Federation of Snowmobile Clubs, there's 180 clubs across Ontario, and each of those clubs manage anywhere from 200 to 500 kilometers of trails. They all connect to each other, so in a perfect year when there's snow across the whole province, we can snowmobile from London and Sarnia over to Ottawa, through North Bay, through Sudbury, up to Timmins, Cochrane, and Cap, and all those clubs connect trails. It is a huge tribute to volunteerism in Canada, because this is all volunteer driven. There's a lot of money that comes in from permits, but the permits are paying for, the $500,000 groomers and the fuel and the maintenance on those things. It's all volunteerism that manages those land use permits, even in dealing with the city and the bells and all of that. It's a huge tribute to volunteerism. It's remarkable, actually.
Then to come up with just 9 days.
Yeah.
Last year, right?
So you think about that. You think about all the effort that goes into it. And you think about, I mentioned economic driver. Snowmobiling is between $3 and $5 billion in Ontario alone. So in a good year, we're pushing $5 billion of economic drive, and in a bad year, like last year, probably less, in fact, than $3 billion. So, it's in everyone's interest to support snowmobiling. It's in property owners' interest to help us with their land. It's in Hydro and Bell Canada's interest to help us with the land use permits, because that money that's a huge spend in a time when, specifically in Northern Ontario, spending is challenging, right, in wintertime. So when we have a year like last year, imagine when you're driving from here to Timmins, imagine all those little establishments along the way that snowmobilers will go into and get gas and have lunch and buy a chocolate bar or buy oil or spend money, right? But there's $3 to $5 billion a year being spent, and make no mistake, a lot of that money is happening from North Bay and north, because this is where typically we have consistent annual trail networks, right? So it's significant for sure. And I think about the challenges of small businesses in our area that didn't get that spend last year. And man, if they don't get the spend again this year, I don't know how many of them are not going to make it. And not just those small businesses, but think about the dealerships too, because their shop, we're not riding sleds, so we're not breaking them. So their shops aren't busy. They're not selling parts. They're not selling oil. They're not selling sleds. They're overstocked with inventory. Couldn't get rid of it fast enough in COVID because everybody was buying everything. And then we have a year like last year, and hopefully not again. But imagine if we had 2 bad years, not just for those small businesses, but for the dealerships as well.
It's time to Toyota at North Bay Toyota. Attention truck lovers. Have you been Tundra struck? The powerful and dependable Toyota Tundra is the new definition of grit. Ask us about amazing lease deals on a 2025 Tundra Double Cap SR 4-wheel drive and experience ingenious levels of capability, technology, and refinement. Or maybe you're an SUV lover? Take advantage of a limited shipment of 2025 RAV4s and discover the perfect blend of style, comfort, and efficiency in a compact SUV that ignites your desire to explore. Right now, get excellent lease deals on the Toyota RAV4 LE all-wheel drive and more. It's time to Toyota at North Bay Toyota, 640 McEwen, or online at northbaytoyota.com for details.
How's Tomico doing? Because I only mentioned them because I really felt for them last year. They were saying, hey, could everybody just come up for lunch and just help us through this time? And it was like, how do we help these businesses? And like, it would be, they're still open and operating. And
but they're a great example, right? Like small business that relies on snowmobiling. Portage is another one. Small business that relies on snowmobiling. Camp Conowongo, another one.
Yeah.
They've got some other sources in the summertime, but places like Tomico and Portage and these other ones along the trail through the north, they rely on snowmobiling. They make all of their revenue in January, February, March, and they try to make that last through to next January. That's when all the revenue comes in. So it's a real struggle for these businesses.
I was just to echo what you were saying. I'm not going to say where I was, but it was last winter. It was a mild day in February or whatever. There's no snow, and this guy's pumping gas, and for me, it's like, hey, a nice mild day. He says, I prefer the snow, and he said, white gold for us in Northern Ontario, but we aren't getting it this year. And then he mentioned that he was working at a dealership, and now he's pumping gas.
Yeah,
he says we haven't sold a sled.
Yeah, it's so great example.
It affects the ripple effect of all that is massive.
Yeah, I mean, think about it, right? We use a dealership as an example. They're hiring more people because the shop is busy at the back, and those people are earning income, paying taxes, going out, buying gas, buying new cars, going out for dinner, buying clothes, buying homes. And when that $3 to $5 billion isn't being spent, it has a huge ripple effect, like you say. It's massive.
There's even some snowmobile manufacturers that have shut down. I've heard.
Yeah.
Oh,
yeah.
really?
So, Yamaha is officially out of the game. Their model year 2025 is the last year they're going to produce snow machines. Arctic Cat has not gotten out of the game, but they have announced that they will not be building more sleds until they get rid of their stock of sleds, essentially, is what they're saying. Yeah, so Skidoo and Polaris haven't made any changes to their production at all, but the other two are definitely making changes. And last year was the start of it. Nobody bought sleds last year, and if they did buy sleds last year, they didn't use them.
Right, so they're not buying new sleds.
Buying them this year. Yeah, right. So it's a $3 to $5 billion across Northern Ontario is a big spend. It's a lot.
Oh, yeah.
Well, good thing the fishing is good this year. I'm watching this Lake Nipissing ice fishing board on Facebook and the posts. They're just slaying them. I've never seen so many pictures.
I have heard that fishing is fantastic this year, and I wonder if it's because of the way that the snow came and then the thaw came and then a real cold snap. I wonder if that has an impact on it or not. I'm not
People
sure
are
on the
crediting
science.
the slot size that you have to be within about that much of right. And
everything else goes back. Yeah,
everything else is supposed to go back. All the pictures I see, and some of them are frozen, are these monsters, right? And those aren't in the slot. There's definitely not in the slot, and they're definitely not going back down the hole.
And they're taking pictures of it. Yeah. That's going to get you. That's going to be trouble.
That's one for a whole nother podcast man.
Yeah, well, you got to know that if fishermen if they're hungry, they're eating. And the slot size is a little iffy for some of them if they got a frying pan.
and probably what we're talking about, I would think also, there was, because I'm on Nipissing and there's a lot of huts out there this year. There was hardly any huts out there last year. And then when I went out, talk about the lack of snow. I remember it was the family day long weekend. Went out to visit a buddy at a hut around Deepwater Point, and when I'm coming back, I see all these huts. And when you usually see the propane tanks, it's like, oh, that's like an outfitter, right? So I went over. The little tiny village you had, it was empty. There was nobody there. I'm like, it's a long weekend in February, and nobody's at their huts. Mm-hmm. Like, all those outfitters lost. Like,
huge impact.
Huge, the impact for everybody. So possibly people weren't fishing the lake last winter as well, and it gave it a bit of a reprieve, right?
Yeah, that would have helped too. And you mentioned back to the snowmobiling economic impact, but you mentioned the outfitters, but hotels as well, right?
Yeah.
Like, they would be jammed all winter long, not because of hockey tournaments necessarily. They're jammed up with trucks and trailers, and none of that last year at all. None.
A lot more of it this year. I'm noticing the guys are posting the bungalow guys are they're out there. They got some open weekends. They're pushing their marketing.
More action.
Mm-hmm. So there's a lot of economic action happening there right now. Hopefully that makes up for a little bit of that.
So summertime's a busy time for the club as well. So what are some of the major improvements you made over the summer to get ready for the season?
Yeah, so every club in the region, I would say probably the July, August, September, October period is really, really busy. That's when we sort of clear all the trails from the trees that have come down. We need to rebuild bridges in many cases. We need to, in many cases, reroute some trails because of landowner issues or new trails or whatever the case may be. It's a really, really busy time of year. Regulations have changed as well, such that used to be the case that if we needed to get across a creek or a wet spot, half a dozen guys would go out and knock a few trees down and lay some logs across it and put some boards on it and call it a bridge, and that was great. But now we can't do that anymore. It has to be an engineered, stamped, approved metal bridge that costs, anywhere from $150,000 to $1 million in some cases. So, lots of work, not just in terms of going out and keeping trails clear and often redecking bridges, but lots of work behind the scenes also just with paperwork to make applications for new bridges, to get the funding for the new bridges, normally in combination of OFSC funds and FedNor funds. It's a full-time job just with the application processes. But we're in the process. We've all the clubs regionally have been putting new bridges in different crossings. The one that the North Bay Club is working on currently is on the trail to Quebec. Everybody will know that we groom to the Jocko River on the way to Quebec, and then the groomers turn around because we can't get across that river, and then ideally Quebec comes to the Jocko River and they do the final 10 kilometers sort of thing. Hasn't been working out very well because the Quebec side just doesn't make it to groom that section very often. So we finally got an approval to put I think it's an 80-foot bridge across there. Seems to me it's around $500,000-$600,000, and we should be able to see that in place for the 2026 season. So that's really exciting. It's a big deal for our club, and it's a big deal for snowmobiling, because where we have 33,000 kilometers of trails on the Ontario side, Quebec has the same over there. And this is one of the main connectors between Ontario and Quebec trails. There's only 3 or 4 of them along the border, and this one is probably the most the most frequently used. So to get that bridge in means that we'll be able to actually groom right to the dams and on the Quebec side, and do it consistently, because in the past we've kept our side very, very good, but that last 10K, like when it only gets groomed once a month by the Quebec side, it's a backbreaker. It's a backbreaker.
And how has the closing of the mill, what is that going to mean? Like, I would think snowmobiling will be really important for the restaurants. Like, it was always great that's one of the fun rips I remember going out.
Such a great rip.
And then you would go to I'm trying to think of the
Timrose.
Timrose, yeah. You go to the Timrose, amazing food, great people. It's fantastic. But the reliance on snowmobiling will be huge in that area with the closing of the mill.
Yeah, for sure. And the other impact that has is. And I don't want to say that it's a positive because it obviously impacts the mill too, but we've really been struggling over the past few years with logging in our area, because the loggers are always on some stretch of our trail at some point. And of course they strip that road right down to gravel, and it's not very nice to ride on gravel on your snow machine. So from what I understand, the positive impact on the snowmobiling side is that the logging will move elsewhere, and because of the access to mills, and we should be clear for about 10 years in our area for our trails to be without loggers anywhere on our trails. Now that's, who knows what's actually, that 10 years is a long time, anything can happen. But it will be positive for snowmobiling from a trails perspective. But at the end of the day, that mill drives economic impact, and that's going to be a real kick in the teeth for Tamang for sure. Yeah, but you're right. That is, there's a few favorite trails in the area, and that trail out there is just so fun. It's so fun. Beautiful run.
It's probably the wider trails that we have in the area, right?
Yeah, like straight and lots of whoop-de-woos, and it's a good time.
Shawn, where can people find out more information about the North Bay Snowmobile Club and the trails in our area so they can...
So 2 things. The OFSC website will direct you to maps and current conditions everywhere in Ontario. You can download a mobile app so that when you're riding, you can see where you are, and you can see what trails are near you and what direction you're going. You can do all that through the OFSC website. And then each local club has a Facebook page, North Bay Club, Bonfield Club, West Nipissing, et cetera, South Shore. They all have a Facebook page, and the clubs are really good for keeping everyone up to date on where they've mostly recently groomed, what trails are open, what trails are closed. You'll see details about pressure cracks on Trout Lake and Lake Nipissing when that's the case. So the Facebook pages are really important as well. But the OFSC is where you'll link direct to the maps and all the current information of open trails.
Before we end, just a little bit, please, on where you can go in the city.
Yeah, so city access is limited for sure. There are a few, we're working on that with the city, but there are a few accesses along Lake Nipissing that will allow snowmobilers to get to hotels, restaurants, and gas stations, even right down to, what's that hotel there by the Rona, that new
Homewood?
one? Yeah, the Homewood. So even accesses to that as well. So again, on the maps, you'll see that. And then when you're out on Nipissing on the marked trail, there will be a sign for the Best Western. There's a sign for all the accesses, not just Best Western, but fuel and restaurants as well. So so we're getting there. Access to North Bay in particular had been limited for a lot of years. but they're slowly but surely relaxing their what were very tight rules.
How long has your club been in? It's the 100th birthday for the city, so everybody's celebrating some type of anniversary. How long has the North Bay Snowmobile Club been around?
It seems to me that we're in the range of 70 years at this point.
Yeah, I think so too.
And that would be the case for most clubs across Ontario. Again, 180 clubs and imagine 70 years of intense volunteerism, because this is all done by just guys like you and I on our weekends and at nights. It's a real tribute to volunteerism in Canada for sure.
Real marriage saver.
Yeah, that's right. Honey, I'll be gone for the day. Again. No, and I appreciate you having us in, because we all know that snowmobiling is important to our northern communities, but to talk about that economic impact and the real ripple effect, as you say, that snowmobiling in particular has to our Northern Ontario communities, it really is significant. And, we're a pretty small group in comparison to many. Snowmobilers are a pretty small group. But I would just encourage people to welcome them and be happy when you see trucks and trailers jamming parking lots, and be happy when you see snowmobiles jamming parking lots and snowmobile helmets jamming the restaurants, because
it's money.
It's money. And as I always say, when we ride, we've got underwear in one pocket, toothbrush in another pocket, and just wads of cash and credit cards, because we buy everything everywhere we go.
There you go.
It's a big deal.
Shawn Flindall is the Director of Marketing and Communications with the North Bay Snowmobile Club. Thanks for coming in, Shawn.
Thank you, guys.
Yeah, thank you.
Happy winter.
Happy winter. Come on, snow. It's white gold. We need it now. We got the ice. Now give us some snow. Now give us snow. That was another Echo Essentials podcast.
I'm Dave Dale.
And I'm Scott Clark. Thanks for joining us.